everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Director of Market Strategy for Parabolis. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, my guest is Farooq Mitha, who you may know as the former director of the Office of Small Business Programs for the Department of Defense. And now he's the president and CEO of Imbue Group, empowering small businesses in the national security and technology industrial base to compete, win, and lead in an ever-evolving landscape. Welcome to the show, Farooq.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time. I know summertime tends to be an uptick for a lot of reasons. People are trying to get stuff in and people are also trying to go on vacation. So I appreciate you making time for us today.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, you have a super impressive background in government and industry. So I would really love it if we can begin by you sharing how both experiences have influenced your work and overall career.
Yeah, it's a good question. I spent 14 plus years straight in the Department of Defense, starting in 2011, when I came into the Obama administration as the special assistant in the Office of Small Business Programs, which I ran in the Biden administration. But in between, I was still there as a contractor with my own small business, helping programs. And I really, throughout those 14 years, I learned how the Pentagon works, what the programs are, what the entry points are. And it can be really confusing for small businesses because it's a big apparatus, and understanding what the opportunities are, what the right program offices are, and how to break in can be really difficult. In my time, I had some really great experiences. I helped stand up the Defense Innovation Unit. I helped stand up our Manufacturing Innovation Institutes. I ran the Small Business Office. So all of those things have really helped me do what I'm doing now, which is advising industry on how they can best position themselves to do business with DoD, but also governments, whether that's local governments or state governments, and even foreign governments that are thinking about how do we best structure our policies and programs to support small businesses in our own nation. So it's been really helpful to what I'm doing now.
I got to imagine, though, given the fact of all the different ranks you've had within government, that you're good at two things. You're really good at understanding the acquisition and federal marketplace process. And you're also really good at making friends on the inside because you can't have positions like you've had and not know the right hands to shake and babies to kiss. I mean, it's super impressive. I think I love it even more because, like we talked about when we were preparing for this conversation, you're a Florida native like I am. And so I think I'm a sucker for that too. And to see you go all the way from Lakeland up to DC and terrain the ranks the way that you have is really awesome. I'm super impressed. And I know that our listeners are going to really value the level of depth that your knowledge will be able to lend to them throughout this conversation, given your being seated at both sides of the table in your experience. And so this is awesome. So I really appreciate you spending time with us today. I know that you're super busy and I do have a lot of questions for you. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. I want to talk about your time at the DoD, in particular with the accomplishments that you're most proud of from your time there.
Yeah, when I started in 2021 in my last DoD stint, we were losing about 6% of our small business prime contractors every year, 5 or 6%. And what that meant was if you look back in the last decade, we actually lost about 40% of our suppliers.
Wow.
Now, prime contracting suppliers. Now, I thought to myself that how can, on the one hand, we say we're open for business, but on the other hand, we're losing that many of our suppliers on an annual basis and over the past decade. So what I really wanted to do was to make sure that we sent the right signals to industry that the DoD is open for business and that the DoD was specifically open for small businesses. And the number one way I did that was to make sure that our small business programs were on stable footing. When I walked in, the SBIR STTR program was on the verge of lapsing the authority from Congress. The DoD Mentor Protege program was zeroed out, It had been a pilot program for over 30 years. We had another program called the Rapid Innovation Program, which was unfunded since 2019. And our old PTAC program, which I took over and turned into our Apex accelerators, were quite stagnant. And I think anybody would have told you for like, they're in one place for 30 years and they were pretty stagnant. So what I aim to do is to really get permanency for the programs. So we made Mentor Protege permanent, get the long-term authorization we needed for other programs, and fund all of our programs in the president's budget. So we're sending a clear indication to industry that we have the programs, they're authorized, they're funded. And by the way, we're doubling down on making sure that our small business professionals in the acquisition workforce are getting engaged at the earliest part of the acquisition process so they can actually influence opportunities for small businesses. When I left in January of this year, our that decline was stabilized. We lost last fiscal year not even a quarter of a percent. So to me, that's stable, whereas we were losing 5 to 6% before. So that's one of my biggest accomplishments that I'm most proud of.
That's awesome. And I know that a lot of people who are listening to our show lean on the Apex accelerators significantly for help, not just in the beginning, but throughout. I work pretty closely with several offices throughout the United States, and they're not just working with startups. As a matter of fact, they're usually working with businesses that have been in business with the federal marketplace for quite some time. It's the connections and the access to education and opportunity and the fact that they're readily accessible as opposed to finding someone to work fractionally for you. And so that is, an impressive part of your background there. But like you said, the stabilization of keeping the people that are working to achieve the mission and the goals of the DoD is important. And you want to attract more as well. And so obviously you're subsidizing for those that have left with those that are new ones that are coming in. And that's a great thing. And that's a lot of I think really good momentum that you created in your time there and something that you should be really proud of. So that's amazing.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
thank you. If I can add one thing to that, I wanted to
sure.
make sure my whole time I was there that we never punish successful companies, right? Like we want companies to be able to grow, to thrive, to succeed, and hopefully become other than small and keep being able to compete. And then
Mhm.
we want a fresh set of companies coming in that are new entrants. And striking that balance is difficult, but it was something that I really worked hard to do the best I could to achieve that.
Well, that's awesome, and that's an important highlight there as well. I think anyone that's in business is doing it for the growth perspective of it, right? And success comes in a lot of different ways, and growth is just one of them, and so I think that's an important add there, definitely. What are some of the programs from the DoD that industry can leverage to break in and compete? I know you were on the inside for a long time, and the landscape itself is changing right now, obviously, with new administration and things coming down the pike. But what are some of your recommendations that industry is able to leverage in order to be a little bit more competitive in the market?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will say that by and large, I would say defense acquisition, procurement, research and development is generally pretty stable and has bipartisan support. So I think those things are good. My old organization oversees the Apex accelerators that we talked about, but I want to just make clear that when I took the program over, we really revamped it and breathed new life into it, gave the program goals and metrics that really helped companies become DIB ready, what we call GIB ready for government contracting broadly, and to really make sure that readiness was there and the education and training was there on top of the counseling because there are barriers and the Apex accelerators are there to help companies break down those barriers. But also the Mentor Protege program is a great program for companies that are looking to really get business developmental assistance, where we actually have a funded program at DoD that provides a cost reimbursement to the mentors. Now, when I was in the job and I made that program permanent, we actually lowered the threshold of revenue in the law. So you could have mentors that were smaller. Before, you had to show that you had $100 million of revenue in the previous fiscal year from DoD, and we lowered that to 25 million. So we could actually have more medium-sized or larger, successful small businesses do that mentoring. Times you can learn better from a small who's been in your situation before, right? There's a lot of other opportunities. In the overall industrial policy organization, there's the Defense Production Act that has really helped there to help companies scale and provide them contracts for equipment purchases that can scale their production. On the research and engineering side, There's the manufacturing technology program. We've got 8 or 9 manufacturing innovation institutes all across the country that DoD sponsors that are helping companies with advanced manufacturing capabilities. And DoD actually competes projects through those institutes for those of your listeners who are manufacturers. You have the Defense Innovation Unit. And when I first was in the department and DIU was stood up, my old office sent the first person to work over there.
Well,
And now, all these years later, almost a decade later, it's $1 billion budget organization, right?
mm,
They are really figuring out how do we prototype, how do we work with commercial companies, and then the services have a bunch of their own programs. For those of your listeners who don't know, every military department and defense agency has an Office of Small Business Programs, and there's an entire workforce that's there doing outreach, market research. They're there to influence acquisitions, support industry days. My old office is really there as a hub to enable all of these things and to be a one-stop shop resource center, and it's still there, business.defense.gov. We had a very simple website where companies could go and really learn about the different programs and opportunities, but there's so many, and the ones that I mentioned, although not all of them are small business specific programs, they do 80 to 90% of their awards to small businesses. So that's another interesting thing to know for your listeners.
yeah, that's awesome. I think there are so many resources available that I think people just aren't aware of. I think when people think of the mentor protege program in particular, they don't realize that the DoD has its own that's separate and parcel to the SBA program. So it is something that is, and because of that, it helps match up better for those DoD fits between companies that may be a little bit larger and a little bit more successful that can mentor the proteges that are coming into the program that are really trying to learn from the different experiences of those companies that are a little bit further ahead of them. So I think, kudos to the lineup that you just provided there, because I think a lot of those are things that people don't know about, and manufacturing being such a big initiative right now in so many ways, both with the past administration's allocations through the budget and now presently as well. I think that there's a lot to lean into there. I know a lot of different organizations that we support are really having a heavy focus on drilling down and on the manufacturing industry itself and providing people with different resources to break into to not just DoD agencies, but across the board, because there's so much there that there's support being provided, both on the federal government level, but also on the state and local levels as well. So that's really one of those industries that's a point of interest right now in general. And so I'm glad that you highlighted that as well. I actually wasn't aware of that resource.
Yeah, and also I would say that product focused companies, I think, will continue to do well. I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now about where government contract is headed, but the reality is the US government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And in the military specifically, the DoD doesn't make a lot of stuff. We need it.
Right.
So regardless of administration, there will always be a need for close collaboration with industry. And I think I would recommend to your listeners to make sure you see what the priorities of any given administration is, see where the leadership is going. And part of the purpose of my old office was to help with that because, look, larger companies can go in, they can meet with the undersecretary, they can meet with the secretary, no issue. They have lobbyists. If you're a small business owner, and I am now a small business owner too, you're the lobbyist and you're the CFO and the CTO and the BD person and everything. So our job is really, in my old office, was to get out there and communicate with industry and share what the priorities are, share where the opportunities are, and make it easier for companies like your listeners to be able to do business with the government.
Mhm. The marketing of your business to not only the mission at hand, but to the person who is, buying whatever it is that you're selling is super important. We talk about that all the time here, that appropriate marketing itself and making sure that what you're marketing is aligned with the mission is super important. So I'm glad that you highlighted that too, because it's a lot of what we talk about here. I think small businesses sometimes try to show that they can do too much instead of drilling down on what's really important to the person that they're trying, or the agency, not the person, but the agency that they're trying to sell to, and understanding what the overall mission is there, and then presenting their solution to that problem for them. So I'm glad that you pointed that out because we talk about that a lot on the show, and that's great.
Yeah, and I could just add one more thing I didn't
Sure.
mention was the DoD SBIR STTR program for those of your listeners who are innovators, R&D type companies. I mean, almost every agency has an SBIR program. DoD's is the biggest. When you're really thinking about what we call America's seed fund, we are literally helping companies from the earliest stages of concept feasibility through prototyping, and we're putting our requirements out there, and we're saying, "Hey, here's what the government needs, and we're gonna fund companies to help us build these capabilities." That's a great deal. Now, it's not
Yeah.
always an easy program to break into, but there's topics that are coming out every almost 3 times a year, I believe. So, I also would highly encourage companies to keep an eye on that as well.
Absolutely. Great advice. Let's move on and talk about how is the DoD looking to bring in more innovation, speaking of, and especially attracting more commercial companies. We're opening the market up a little bit now, which we need to. Small businesses are typically more agile, of course, than the larger companies are able to be. But we haven't opened up the market easy enough for commercial companies to really engage at the level that we're really pushing forward right now in an initiative. So, what are some recommendations that you have for businesses that are looking to engage potentially for the first time?
Yeah, so this I'll just start by saying that probably a decade ago or more, we realized that the department or the federal government writ large is not the driver of innovation the way it was in the 70s and 80s, for example. The commercial markets are now the leaders, and we gotta bring these companies in, and if we don't, we'll be left behind because the cutting edge technology development, innovation, etcetera, is happening in the private sector. And a lot of times those companies don't wanna do business with the government because they're like, "Ah, it's takes too long. There's a lot of regulations. I don't really know who to talk to." And by the way, like just negotiating the terms of a contract are just too hard and it's too one-sided. There's no dialogue. I think when the Obama administration stood up both the Manufacturing Innovation Institutes and the Defense Innovation Unit, it really laid the groundwork of what you're seeing today, which is a lot more engagement with what we call like non-traditional companies that don't normally do business with the DoD. And that happens in a lot of ways. You've got the services, the military departments that have Naval X, and they've got Air Force has AFWorks, and Army has Army Futures Command. SOCOM has SOFTWorks, and there's other works types organizations that I
Mhm.
think are really important. So those are good engagement points. And usually the Apex accelerators are connected to all of them. So my goal was to bring Apex and actually have them be the node that kinda connects the dots for industry to all these other players that I just mentioned. The other piece of this is, how do we actually contract with commercial companies or really small companies?
Mm.
You have the normal process through the federal acquisition regulation and the defense supplement, the FAR and the DFARS. When you actually look at how Defense Innovation Unit and groups like that are now contracting with innovators, especially for prototyping, they're using what we call other transactional authorities, which are outside of the traditional regulations. That means that if I'm the customer on the government side, I can come to you and I can very directly speak to you about the terms and conditions of the agreement. And we can negotiate those terms and conditions. We can negotiate IP rights, and we can do it fast at speed, just like you would do in the private sector. We can get an agreement done in weeks instead of months or years. And I took that model and I actually applied it to the mentor protege program, where before I took over, it was taking us 18 to 24 months to get a mentor protege agreement awarded.
Wow.
Now, I used to say that if I needed business developmental assistance, and it took me 2 years to get it, I might be out of business.
Right.
We now got the timeline down to less than 60 days for getting
Wow.
a proposal. So all those things, you're seeing this change in culture about moving faster, using more commercial terms and agreements, having more flexible contracting authorities. And I think those things are gonna continue to grow and be used more often.
I agree. I mean, I think, you know, long are the days gone that far is the only pathway forward. It's congested and it's slow, and people already know all of that, right? So finding access and pathways that are led there via other vehicles is super important. And you've just highlighted a few of them. And I think it's all about staying educated about what's the fastest way to get yourself in front of the right buyers. And there are other pathways to get there than just the traditional sense. And the newer businesses are probably going to figure that out faster because they're emerged now or immersed now into the environment that's telling them that this is what you should do, as opposed
Yep.
to being involved in it for a little while and just doing it the way that it's always been done. So it's exciting to see how things will kind of change the way that we do things, because there haven't been a lot of changes prior to right now. And we probably won't see another. I think FAR hasn't had an overhaul in what, the last 40 years or so. I probably won't see another
It's
in
about
my
to get one.
lifetime.
It's about to get one, so let's see what
Right.
it's like, you know?
If they're doing them every 40 years, though, this might be the last one that I get to see in my lifetime. So I hope they make it good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And by the way,
uh,
we have consortia that are sponsored by DoD. There's
mhm,
partnership intermediary agreements, and these are really for companies that are specialized in a certain technology space, and the service is sponsor these, and you can join. Consortia sometimes get a bad rep because you have to pay at times to join. It
right.
could be worth it though. And the intermediary agreements are a way that customers use to mature technologies, and they use a nonprofit intermediary to actually help get money to companies faster and to
Mhm.
actually grow and help them develop their technologies with the government support.
Right. And that's a good segue to the next question that I had for you with regard to cybersecurity readiness. I mean, anyone engaging with the DoD is supremely aware of this being an issue. How do we help those non-traditional and small businesses with the barriers that are coming with the compliance there? Because this is a big need. I mean, in my industry, a lot of people are rushing and flooding my inbox right now of how in the heck am I going to pay for all of this? And there's a lot more to it than just being able to afford it.
Yeah, no question. So I'll start by saying that I think everyone agrees in government and industry that something needs to be done. Because when our industrial base is not cyber secure, not only is the government at risk of losing important data and information, but so are the companies. Like your hard work that you go into developing your capability could be stolen,
Hmm.
aided, sold off. It says there's a big risk for everyone involved. You see now that the DoD's cybersecurity maturity model, CMMC, is starting to slowly roll out.
Hmm.
Before I left, the rule was finalized. Look, I think there's a debate right now around how much support should the government be giving to industry for compliance. And now that I'm not in government, I can speak more freely about this. But look,
Right.
I think if we take the position that industry, you figure it out and just comply, but we're not going to provide you any resources, technical assistance, or support to comply. I think that's a big problem because we're at a time right now. Like I just finished telling you that we lost a big chunk of our industrial base and we kind of stabilized that. What will it do if we now put more burden, more regulations on the companies that are non-traditional commercial innovators, very small, that we want to do business with us? We tell them that, oh, by the way, we're not really going to help you do it. Just figure it out.
Right.
That's not going to help the mission. It's not going to help the warfighter, and it's not going to help us compete with China and others, right? So I really believe there's a role for government to play in terms of a base level of support. Now, when I was in government, we established a platform called Project Spectrum that my old office oversees. And there's education, training, tools, capability assessments, access to some cyber advisors there for companies. And at least it helps you establish a baseline of where you need to go and or where you are at and what you need to actually comply, right? So you know that you're not overspending. You know you can save some money on costs, on education, training, and baselining. Because by the way, some of those things that Project Spectrum offers are actually part of the compliance journey to be CMMC compliant. So I think you'll be seeing a lot more conversation around this within DoD, from Congress, of how do we continue to figure out what the role is for government.
Hmm.
Position is the role can't be zero, because if it's zero, we're not gonna get the innovation that we need that we just finished talking about.
Right. And that's changing every day. So the faster we decide on which way we're going to go on that, the better, I think. Time's the clock's ticking, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Mhm. Your relationships have always been important, I'm sure, both when you are on, the private side and then moving into the public side as well. and being able to engage with people and advocate for yourself. And then, furthermore, talk to the right people that can help advocate to those higher ups that you might not have access to. When we were prepping for this, you talked a lot about how important it was with people engaging with the government. And so let's discuss the importance of talking to Congress about the programs that particular businesses are working. When cuts are happening, what are you doing? And what's the benefit of elevating the issues to your legislators, both locally and, the ones that are representing you in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, when I was in my job at the Pentagon, noticed that a lot of times I would be clamoring to the hill about what I thought we needed and what I thought was either going right or not going right. But what really makes the biggest impact is when businesses talk about it, right? Because that equates to capability for the warfighter. It equates to jobs in districts. And look, I think it's easy to turn something off, but it's much harder once it's off to turn it back on and to get what you need. And I think it's really important in a time like this for government customers, members of Congress, and others to really hear what impact certain decisions are having. And if certain programs stay, go, grow, get cut, whatever, we have to make in the government, I think the government has to make informed decisions. And I think that the more voices go to your local member of Congress, and they usually have a military liaison officer, just go talk to them and they're there to help you. And I think when that happens, then they give that feedback to people in the agencies. And I think it's important because oftentimes when you have a change of administration, you also get new people coming in who may not understand or have the experience of a career civil servant, for example. So I think it's important for that feedback loop to be on point, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. I know that some people are intimidated by the whole reaching out, thinking that there's an untouchable element there. And we always encourage people that it's just people putting
Yep.
their pants on one leg at a time too, unless they're really talented and they can jump in with both feet, which I'm sure some of them would attest to. But
Yeah,
uh,
yes. Yeah.
you know, but I think this has all been really great advice. I think a lot of what our listeners are leaning into is the fact that you have sat at both sides of the table, and your business that you're currently endeavoring on is trying to assist even more with these businesses engaging in the marketplace. So I encourage everyone to connect with Farouk on LinkedIn and check out his website for his company. If it's something that you find that the services provided could be a good fit for you, definitely reach out. We full-heartedly, support what you're doing and wish you the best of luck in the future. And hopefully we can convince you to come back on as things are changing, because they're bound to in the next couple of quarters. Going to
Yep.
provide us with some new stuff to talk about. So I hope you'll come back.
Yeah, we're definitely in a period of change, but no, I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope there's value for it with your listeners, and I'm happy to continue to engage.
Oh, I guarantee you we're going to get some great feedback from this. So I appreciate it very much. And as always, I appreciate all of you for joining us. We pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our Parabolas YouTube channel. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.